the first session, which is Accelerating Change Through Allyship with our headline sponsors, Amazon. Ramona Williams is a DEI change manager at Amazon. She's going to host the panel with colleagues to share insights on how Amazon is making an impact from advocacy to action with their men as allies on the program. Without further ado, could I please welcome to the stage Ramona Williams, Kate Stevens, Ant Moore, and Misha Lewis.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be the headline sponsors for this amazing event. I first came across Edwin, I think it was last year, in this exact spot, wasn't it? And he was taking photos. I think most of us will know him through taking photos. And he mentioned, he's like, we're having a photo shoot in January. Why don't you come down? And I was like, I'm in. A good photo. Let me just come down for that. But at the same time, he then introduced me to Cassim. Cassim and I got on a call and we started talking simply just about some of the programs that they're leading and some of the things that we're doing. And we saw some great synergies between the work, which is to help progress women in business or just women in general. I think it's great that we have two men that are leading on this event today. And then thank you to all of the people who work behind the scenes as well, which I'm sure are men and women, to bring the event today together. We're honoured to be here. And as we celebrate International Women's Day, and the theme being Accelerate Action, we think that it's sort of fitting to explore how allyship can drive that meaningful change. So knowing that men are really important to the conversation. So today we'll explore practical ways that we drive, or we try to drive, gender equity through that allyship. We'll share some real life experiences, and then it's the actionable insights that I think a lot of people are really interested in, because we have a lot of conversation around this topic, but how do you move from talking about it to actually driving action? What does that look like? And so I'm joined with my diverse panel from Amazon, and I'll get them to introduce themselves. I am Ramona Williams, by the way, so I'm a DI change manager for Amazon Logistics for UK and Ireland, and then I'll just get my colleagues to introduce themselves briefly as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ramona. So Kate Stevens. So I've had the privilege of working with Ramona for the last 12 months in the DEI space, again for Amazon Logistics in the UK and Ireland. Being at Amazon for 5 years. Before that, my background is operations management. And in between all of that, I've had a little boy. So I'm a mum to a little 2-year-old as well.
Morning, everyone. So my name's Ant Moore. I'm the senior delivery station at one of the Amazon Logistics depots, currently based in Oxford. Really terrible at introductions, so bear with me. In terms of allyship and probably why I'm here, I joined a course, which I'll talk about shortly, 2 years ago, and it's completely revolutionised how I have gone forward. I spent 13 years in aerospace, and I then moved into logistics, very different sectors, and we'll talk a lot more about allyship and how spending 13 years in a predominantly male diverse background going into logistics has changed my perspective on life.
Hi, my name is Misha Lewis. I am a process excellence manager at Amazon. I've worked for Amazon for 3 years now, and previous to that I was in the retail sector, so similar to Ant, coming from a very diverse sector to logistics sector, which is heavily male dominated. I was very eager to sort of drive cultural change, but we'll kind of discuss that more as the panel goes on. But very similar to Kate and Ramona, I have 2 small children as well. But yeah, very excited to be here.
Thank you, team. Thank you. So we're going to dive straight into the discussion. I'm going to come to Kate first. Kate and I, troublesome twosome, we are trying to make waves in the DI space for Amazon Logistics and Amazon as a whole, really, I would say in the UK. But we look after different programs. So as the DI change manager and the one that oversees some of our key programs that support women's growth that have had, what are the main ones that you want to talk about that have had that impact on women in Amazon Logistics?
Yeah, so the work that we're doing in Amazon in terms of the gender equity space is really building, more so over the last couple of years. But I'll reference 2 of our key programmes that we've been running for quite some time. So the first is our Women in Leadership programme, and that's a well-established programme aimed at mid-level female leaders. It's a 2-day programme. usually held at a corporate office, and our female leaders will come, and it's a great opportunity for them to learn real practical skills in terms of networking and career conversations. We share bits around how people can experience challenges both within the workplace and outside of work, and how people can overcome those challenges. And then to complement that programme, we then launched something called Men as Allies a couple of years ago, and that's aimed at our male leaders. So it's a real complementary programme to the Women in Leadership session. It is a one-day course, and this is where male leaders can come, and we really get male leaders to kind of reflect on their upbringing and their previous experiences and how then they perceive females, again, both in work and outside of work. So both practical sessions that we encourage as many of our leaders to attend as possible.
Thanks, Kate. Can you sort of explain Men as Allies in more detail? Again, thinking about the actionable change and how this sort of how it's administered and why we think that it's really important to our strategy.
Yeah, sure. So as I've referenced, it is a one-day programme. And again, we tend to hold it at corporate locations so people can kind of get away from their day-to-day, roles and actually come and truly reflect whilst they're in the session. It's usually led by a female facilitator, and we do that intentionally so that person and the co-facilitator is often female as well. We do that intentionally so those individuals can share their lived experiences with the male leaders in the room. We find that works really well. The start of the session, as I've just referenced, is all around looking at upbringing and past experiences and how they can influence men in their thoughts and interactions with women. Then we move into how they can impact their interactions within the workplace. And again, we give male participants real practical sort of skills and advice that they can then adopt as they go back into the workplace. And, people in the room are quite often sharing best practice with each other, sharing experiences. It's a great networking opportunity, as well as the practical skills that people can take away.
Thanks, Kate. I think that bit around reflection is really important. When we think about how do we end up in a situation where events like this are still required, we do need to think about our thought processes and really dig deep, really, and explore that. And I think Men as Allies allows us to do that, take that moment to pause and think, why is it that I think that this behaviour is okay, or why is it that I don't intervene when I see a behaviour which sort of goes against what I actually know to be best practice or to be the right thing to do. So I think that's one thing that we've seen. But we'll come to Misha now, who, you've really helped us to scale the participation in Men as Allies, and some of the other, some of your other colleagues are sitting here and they're here today as well, that have really helped us with the facilitation to grow this programme. And that's not just here in the UK as well. We've really seen that participation in the EU. Can you share with us, why is it that you got involved? What sort of inspired you about this particular initiative?
I got involved with Men as Allies because I did the Women in Leadership conference probably about 2 years ago, towards the beginning of my tenure at Amazon. And I really enjoyed that programme. I was quite outspoken, and I had a desire for change. And then I found out we were launching Men as Allies, and volunteered to get involved in the programme through that. And then over the course of the last year, I've sort of really tried to scale that programme across the UK and the EU by encouraging male leaders to attend and sort of confront their own bias and look at how they can support female leadership within not only their stations, but across Amazon as a whole, and also encourage that behaviour in their personal lives as well. So for me, it's been very much a passion project that I've enjoyed doing, I've continued to enjoy doing as well.
And you're a little superhero in doing that, because ultimately you have your day job and then you do this, which I know a lot of people, especially if you're involved in any of these DI projects, can sometimes be over and above your actual day roles. So I just want to say, well done for you, and thank you actually for the progress that we've made, because you've been so passionate about driving this forward. Thinking about the actual participants then, what are the sort of key behavioural changes? Because that's what we want to get out of it, isn't it? We want to see these changes in behaviour. So what have you actually observed by the participants?
I think for me, it's their willingness to change and their openness. I think they're very uncertain of what they're going to encounter when they attend a session, but post the session, a lot of the male leaders are very engaged. They want to know straight away, what can I take back to my workspace? What can I deliver on? I think similar to what Ant's talked about, I believe he was in one of my sessions, and that they're always super, super eager to go away and start delivering change, and how can I support female leaders within my space, and how do I encourage them to want to progress? What support can I put in place? And that's been a really, really positive step. I think we've got another male leader in the audience today, Jim, who also has attended, who then has been super, super engaged in the programme itself and wants to help span it. And I think that's a very common theme that we see through these sessions.
Can you sort of share one specific success story that has demonstrated that impact? I think the audience are really interested to know, what does that actually look like? I know you've mentioned, obviously, we're having the male facilitators come on board, which I think that complements the sessions quite a lot, because, it's one of those where we can say something, but then when your peer or some, a male person says it, it might come across or land differently. But what is a sort of success story that you can think of, particularly when you think about men as allies?
I think for myself, it's the male leaders that then reach out and want to find out how to support in a specific situation. So they may have encountered a challenge that a female leader's having in their station, and they're not sure what the best next steps are. And they will always reach out and ask, how do I best support? Who can I send this person to mentor? They'll ask for follow-up sessions with myself or the other facilitators on how to approach a conversation and how to provide the support that's required. So I think that desire to drive change, and that has continued throughout the session. Throughout the year, even after the sessions, you can see that cultural change driving. And they are actively looking at, how do they recruit more females? How do they keep more females within their business? How do they support them with their development and growth? I think that's the biggest success story that we've had out of Men as Allies.
Awesome. And with that, those changes, I think that's what's really important, isn't it? It's not just about being in the session. It's about, what do you do afterwards? And I think even today, right, we're having the conversation, there's going to be lots of speakers, we're going to hear from a lot of inspirational men and women, right? But what do we do tomorrow? And I think we're going to come to you, Ant, now, because you're someone that did do something after attending the session. So you experienced the programme firsthand. What was your most significant learning moment?
I think so. I went on the Allyship course. The bit within the material that stuck out, and to this day still resonates, there's a clip that's available on YouTube. It's called Run Like a Girl by Always. They did an ad campaign, and within that, it really honed in on what I was completely unaware of in terms of unconscious bias, stereotypes that exist from such a young age. And when you watch that video, even to now, and we've now signed up to facilitate the sessions, we watched it 2 weeks ago, and every time it hits really hard in there. And I think the power of influence, the power of stereotypes, the power of unconscious bias and what we don't always see was probably the biggest learning point for me.
Thanks, Ant. And how has it sort of changed, because you are a leader within the business, how has it changed your approach to leadership and the decisions that you make with, for you, your teams and things like that?
Yeah, it's definitely shaped me. I think I'm a lot more consciously aware of the unspoken elements. I think having done the course, having gone back and really reflected, part of the pre-course material was incredible, and then having done the course, going back and reflecting on it, being an ally is key. And it isn't forced ally. It isn't going away and making sure that you walk away all high-fiving, we need to protect women in the workplace. It's actually small, subtle changes in terms of how we include everyone in meetings, how we give equal opportunities to be spoken, regardless of the situation. And I think that in itself, just small, granular changes, rather than trying to force it on the back of the course, has definitely made an impact to some of the team.
Awesome, thank you. So you've talked about the small changes, and so that sort of links onto the next one around the tangible actions. Can you talk about anything in a bit more detail? I don't know if you have an actual example or a situation that you can talk about where you've taken action.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a harrowing statistic, which is that a female will only apply for a job if she's 100% confident that she's going to get the job. That hit deep. I had quite a fortunate female team. And I think the biggest action I took away, linked to the subtle changes and how we hold conversations is actually confidence is key. But again, without forcing it, it can be subtle reassurances. So, for example, I had a female within my team. Fantastic, incredible. And the hardest part about being a leader is you have to let the good people go. And it was as simple as, hey, I've seen this job. I think you'd be amazing at it. Let me know if you're interested and we'll sit and go through it. Versus, hey, there's a job on the board. Are you applying? Little confidence boosts like that and the way that we've kind of framed the conversation has had such a dramatic impact in terms of how we've shaped future leaders, particularly females within the site and the region and the area. But yeah, definitely like the 100% confident bit to this day, and like it resonates really hard. And so we're trying to change that narrative bit by bit, reassurance, confidence, and yeah.
I think that's a really good example, and we talk about, I talk about, talk to male leaders about this as well around, when you're having your one-to-ones, are they effective one-to-ones? And if you've spotted that somebody is doing something or could be better at doing something else or needs a bit of encouragement, are you actually pointing that out? Because they may not do that themselves. And I think that's what you're sort of homing in on there, that, absolutely. I've been there, looking at all of those bullet points of a job role and then being put off by one. And then hearing that a man would probably only want to hit maybe 3 of those bullet points and say, yeah, I'll just give it a go. And it's the way that we've maybe have raised that bar for ourselves, which might be a little too high. And actually, just getting in front of somebody and then getting them to see the skills that we possess. But it's the encouragement that and the knowing that someone's got your back and supportive of that and sees that your value, that's really important. I think those conversations really help, and particularly in one-to-one settings. Okay, so Kate, building on sort of what we've heard from your perspective, I know that Misha talked about changes that she's seen during the Men as Allies sessions, but what are the most effective allyship behaviours that you've witnessed across the network since we sort of launched Men as Allies as a whole?
Yeah, I think it definitely goes back to the point you made, Anne, around the granular changes. And I think that's really key, because when we think about allyship, it needs to be integral to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. It should be within our DNA. It doesn't always need to be those big grand gestures. It's that age-old thing, isn't it, where you can go on a course and then you go back to your day-to-day and your team instantly know that you've been on a course because you just completely changed your way of working, and that's not our intention with the Men as Allies session. We want it to be, as I said, integral into how people operate. I think it really comes down to people being intentional with how they are leading their teams. So, are they giving people within their teams equal opportunity? Are they holding themselves to account when they're, going through things like talent review processes, assigning objectives to people and so on? Are they being fair? And also, we'd ask people to continually circle round, leaders to continually circle round and self-assess and ask themselves the question constantly, am I being fair in my approach to all of my team members? And I think also another point I want to make is it's not necessarily just male allyship that's really important in this space. Quite often when we're holding both the Men as Allies sessions and the Women in Leadership sessions, we often hear around females maybe not supporting other females, and that's really important too. As well as male allyship, we need to ensure that females are acting as active allies for each other, and I think that's really key.
Yeah, really good point. And not competition, right? Because sometimes that's where we found if there's only a couple in a team that they automatically might think, well, it's either me or you, right? But we need to change that mindset. And I think the sessions that we host, the fact that they're, 1 day or 2 day sessions really allow people to talk about what the actual experience is and how does that look differently, like you say, when we go back into workplaces. But then once we've started these sort of programs and we're having good conversations, what are the actual mechanisms that can be used to measure if they're actually working? Like how do we know that the impacts are having the intention that we set out to have in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, within the business, we can be data driven, and of course we can look at our sort of gender equity and where we stand from a data point of view. But equally as important as that data piece is the anecdotal feedback and the feedback that we're hearing from our female, colleagues and leaders within the workplace. I said earlier, we want women to feel just as valued as their male counterparts and their male colleagues. So we need to foster a culture where we're continually seeking that anecdotal feedback from females. We need to hold ourselves to account, as I've just referenced, in terms of our day-to-day leadership, but we also need to hold each other to account. So, when we're in those sort of calibration sessions, when we're looking at talent review and so on and so forth, and we're with our peers, if we can see and identify, non-equitable and non-inclusive behaviours, we need to be calling them out, in my opinion. And that's definitely the sort of culture that we are looking to foster within Amazon. And the Men as Allies session certainly helps us, start on that journey.
Thank you. I think what you've touched on there is that we have formal touch points, don't we, within a year, and this doesn't necessarily just have to be within a business, but there's formal points, meetings, etc., where we can ensure that the voices are being heard within the room, and then also that we're speaking up for people who and advocating for those in those formal spaces. But then it's also the informal piece. It's what are we hearing? What is the feedback? What is the noise as such? And what action are we taking on the back of that? And not waiting for somebody else to do it, I think is really key. I like the bit around holding people to account, because I think that we can see something and see that and it can make us feel really uncomfortable, but it's the next step, isn't it? It's that being that upstander, it's that asking the right questions or challenging in the right way to say that's not productive, ultimately, and doing that. So I think there's lots of different points, formal and informally, where we can keep the conversation going, but also test whether or not we're having the correct change in our behaviours. Sort of leads us on to the next bit, which is around some of the challenges in doing this, right? What stops us from actually making the programme progress that we want to? And then sort of what are the solutions that we've come up with? So from your perspective then, Anne, can you sort of talk to me about how to overcome the resistance or the scepticism around, is this even worth having this conversation? Do women even need to be supported in this way? Like, what have you heard, and how do we overcome that?
Yeah, I probably look inwardly when I answer this. So when there was the initial advertisement for the Men as Allies programme, I had a female manager. All of my peers within the area leadership team were all females, and my direct reports were all females. And I think there was an element of, I know it all to a point, but going on the programme, it would be remiss not to share an Amazon leadership principle, but we talk a lot about learn and be curious. I think my advice would always be, challenge your unconscious bias, challenge your awareness. You don't know what you don't know. And I think when we did the pre-work, in particular, part of the assessment is you interview female leaders at various points, and they go through varying levels of in-depth conversation. And when you hear some of the silent struggles that people go through, it really makes you reflect in terms of like the resistance and the various other elements that we see to this day. So it's about challenging the bias, learn, be curious. And I think the most poignant advice that I was ever given was listen to understand, not to respond. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking to female leaders or anyone in your daily life, listen to understand, go deeper in terms of what people are trying to say, rather than always listening to respond.
Thanks. Great advice there, Anne. Misha, from sort of your perspective then as the programme leader, what are the biggest challenges that you faced in implementing the initiatives in the first place?
I think the biggest challenge has been the fear that some of the male leaders have, that attending a session around allyship and around supporting female leadership is going to be a session that involves man bashing. I guess that's the best way I can put it. They think they're coming to a session to spend the day being told off about things that they're doing wrong. And no one wants to do that. No one wants to leave their space to then be told about all the things they're doing wrong, and there's a lot of fear that it's going to be something negative. And I think for myself, in terms of rolling out the programme, it's just around that education piece, using people that have already attended, like such as Anne and Jim, to go back and talk about what the session actually entailed and what they've learnt from the session, and sharing that education piece, because there is a lot of helpful tools and mechanisms that we provide you with to support. So I know Kate touched on something, but we talked about like bias busters within our appraisals that we utilise as well. And it's a key part of the programme is around education. And I think once male leaders understand that they're going to be educated, there's a lot more interest in attending those sessions. And I think post-session, people do see the value in it. So that negates that fear. But I would say that is the biggest fear initially.
And it's understandable, right? Because it is that why do I need to talk about this? And maybe to Anne's point, I think I've got a sister, I've got a wife, I know a lot, but ultimately what we're saying is take time out to really hear some of the challenges, and then what's your role to play in changing that, and that's what will help to change it altogether. So Kate, would just come to you then on what's the difference between sort of surface level support and then that genuine allyship. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that open communication piece in your day-to-day, but also to that holding yourself to account. So when you're making commitments with your team members, female leaders within your teams and so on, it's making sure that you hold true to those, commitments. It's also, for me, around psychological safety, so making sure that you're fostering, a space where people can talk openly, whether things are going well, whether things are going bad. You need to be able to foster that culture of open communication to really hear what people in your team are saying, how they're feeling, what can you do to help, and I think that's really key.
Thanks, Kate. So we're going to be closing the panel shortly, but what I will say is I think people like practical tips, right? So what is there? And I think, if you can take 1, 2, 3 maybe from today, not too many, because sometimes they can say, I'm going to do all these 10 things, right? But actually just 1 or 2 things that you take away that you're going to commit to doing differently is really helpful. So can you each share a practical tip that our audience can sort of take away, implement immediately to help to drive this agenda forward? And Misha, I'm going to come to you first on that one.
I guess my first tip would be to say for the female leaders to speak to yourself like you would speak to your best friend. I think to Ant's point, when we want to be 100% ready for a role, you would often encourage your best friend to go for a role that they're great at. And then for the male leaders in the room, I would say have an open mind and don't be afraid to start a conversation. I think create a space where you can just start having small conversations around any challenges that your female leaders may be facing. And that's the first step, is just starting a conversation and moving forward.
Thank you. Kate, I'll come to you next.
I was going to talk about open communication as well. No, sorry, Mish. But I've got another key one. I think I would encourage any leaders in the room, anyone that's got a team of direct reports, to go away. And it's great for this time of year, to be fair, because you've probably no doubt been thinking about your objectives for the year ahead, and you've assigned people with tasks, right, objectives, what they need to deliver. And I would go away and just really assess, have you been fair in that delegation? And have you kind of made a conscious effort to, assign, share tasks, share the load in a fair and equitable way? And I would just encourage people to go away and think about that.
Thanks, Kate. Anne, what is your practical tip?
I believe we've got a video which I'm going to share. In simple put, it's not about the nail. So we'll watch a video shortly, which I think is absolutely relevant. I think back to Kate's point, sometimes addressing the obvious for some people is really uncomfortable, but sometimes we've got to do it. So making sure we're a really good ally through the good and the bad, challenging conversations. It's not about the nail.
Mm-hmm. And we'll watch that video just in a few minutes. So I just want to thank you all for coming today. We've come from all over the UK to be here. We'll be spending the rest of the day as well. So thank you to the panellists for sharing your insights and your experiences. And we've talked about sort of the power of active allyship, and I think the word active is really important, and that will help us to drive cultural change. It's important that we always try, and I think it's a bit of an Amazonian thing where we talk about data and measuring, but ultimately, how do you know you're making progress if you don't know where you started? So what is where are you now? Where do you want to get to? Where do you female, not just leaders, but in your environments, whether that's personal or professional, where do they want to get to, and what role can you play? This is male and females, right? Everybody can play a role in helping others to get to where they need to get to. So how do we all become active allies? And then how do we know that that's working? So what's that measure? And then, particularly, I think it's important because if we know the situation which we're in the UK around, seeing females within senior leadership. So as much as we are breaking barriers and breaking glass ceilings or whatever the saying may be, we still know that a lot of the decisions are being made by males in these rooms, and they impact women tremendously. So, what are we going to do to ensure that the conversations are being had, the uncomfortable conversations are being had in those rooms, and that there is a voice that is speaking up for a woman that just needs that opportunity to show her greatness, right? So that's going to be really important to close these gaps that we see. We do have a stand downstairs in the exhibition area where we've partnered with our talent acquisition team, and they're our specialists, and they're here to discuss career opportunities within Amazon as well. So feel free to visit the stand. Feel free to talk to any of us. Like I said, there's a lot of people here who have been on this journey to help to change and be active allies, but also to be facilitators and encourage these conversations and create these psychologically safe environments so that we can move forward as a business. And we've still got work to do, but it's great to have such a great team that's willing to do that. So feel free to come and speak to us as well. And yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having us here today. I'm so glad that we've been able to support the event as headline sponsor. And we'll see how we can continue to keep doing things like this because it's really important to us. So on that note, just want to say thank you and give you a little round of applause. Thank you for sharing. And we've got a video that we'd like to end the session with, and I think everyone can take a little bit away from this video. I love this video, by the way. So we hopefully are going to play that for you.
It's just, there's all this pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail out.
See, you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. All of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on?